Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there are wildly varying reports of the number of casualties from Al-Shabaab's latest raid on AU soldiers in Somalia. Dozens may have died in an attack on an Ethiopian base Thursday. We get the latest from our correspondent. Also, Zimbabwe takes its cash flow into its own hands with plans to print new currency. The move is in a bid to ease reliance on the US dollar, which is getting harder to come by, but many have misgivings about the plan. And Ballet has leapt onto the cultural radar of Lagos. The founder of an art school in the Nigerian city takes a gamble in introducing the Western style to the curriculum. It seems to be paying off. Well, first, we turn to Somalia, where Al-Shabaab used a suicide car bomber and gunmen in the latest raid targeting African Union peacekeepers in the country. It's still not clear how many were killed in the attack on the Ethiopian army base in the Haran region. The strategy has been increasingly used by the militants, with sites manned by Burundian, Ugandan and Kenyan troops having been similarly struck over the last year or so. Our regional correspondent, Duncan Woodside, brings us more. Duncan, as I mentioned there have been contradicting numbers about fatalities and captured fighters coming from Al-Shabaab and the African Union. What are you hearing?
Well, what we are hearing from various reports quoting eyewitnesses on the ground was that there was indeed this attack which took place this morning in this part of Somalia, which is occupied by Ethiopian forces. It was against a military base housing both Ethiopian troops and Somali National Army troops, involving a suicide bombing at the main entrance, which then provided cover, the element of surprise for Shabaab troops to try and storm that compound through that front gate. That's, though, where the consensus ends. We get these very different accounts being portrayed by the different sides. What Shabaab are saying is that they killed 60 Ethiopian troops and lost 16 of their own men. The Ethiopians, meanwhile, rubbish that account. What they're saying is that the Shabaab attack was quickly overpowered, that the militants were pursued, and that over 100 Shabaab fighters were killed, while heavy weaponry was also seized, including PKM machine guns. But it's obviously impossible to verify those accounts without any real access on the ground.
So, Duncan, Shabaab seems to be having been ramping up these targeting of foreign troops. Is this likely to affect contributing countries' commitment to the AU mission?
Well, up until recently, the commitment of the various troop-contributing countries was steadfast. You have Uganda, Burundi, Ethiopia and Kenya as the main troop contributors. They all have several thousand troops on the ground in this 22,000 troop mission, which has scored significant successes against Al-Shabaab over the last few years. Shabaab, for example, were pushed out of most major urban centres, including Mogadishu, between 2011 and 2013. Since then, though, Shabaab have been resurgent. There have been big attacks, surprise attacks like the one this morning against military bases, quite often bases which are badly protected in the bush. And it's clear that the African Union is thinly spread. And over the last month or so, there have been murmurings from both the Ugandan government and the Kenyan government that they're considering pulling their troops out of Somalia. And that's in a context where the European Union has cut funding for troops on the ground by 20% a few months ago. That's a real bugbear for the troop contributing nations. They really feel let down by the European Union and the West in the fight against Shabaab.
Thanks very much. Duncan Woodside there. Well, a look now at some news in brief. Libyan officials say that fighters allied to the UN-brokered government have forced Islamic State militants into a retreat from Sirte. The central city had become a stronghold for the extremists, the only one to be held by IS outside of Syria and Iraq. Its capture follows a month-long offensive by the pro-government militia. On Thursday, they pushed further into Sirte, reaching the central Zafarana roundabout, where they dismantled the stage where Human Rights Watch says IS killed at least 49 people. Italian prosecutors are looking into claims that the suspect extradited from Sudan, accused of being an Eritrean smuggling kingpin, is the wrong man. Named as Mered Yedego Madani, his arrest was announced Wednesday, but alleged friends and family of the detained man say that he's actually Madani Tesfamarian Berhe, a 27-year-old refugee arrested in Khartoum late last month. Now, Mered had been on a wanted list since 2015 and was wanted by anti-trafficking agents in connection to the shipwreck off the Italian island of Lampedusa in 2013, in which at least 360 people were killed. Ethiopian officials insist they will not reconsider a decision not to put Kenenisa Bekele on the Olympic marathon team. Now, the three-time Olympic champion and world record holder won't be going to the Rio Games after failing to meet the qualification rules. That was largely down to having had to take more than a year off because of injury. Now, his performances since returning have been strong, and his omission from the Olympic selection has prompted more than 100 top athletes to protest. Many claim that they weren't told about the change in the rules. Bekele's accused the federation of incompetence and threatened never to run for Ethiopia again. Well, 2,000 Chadian troops are still due to arrive in Niger ahead of a planned offensive against Boko Haram extremists. The Nigerian militants killed dozens of soldiers last Friday after attacking a military post in Bosso in the border region of Diffa. It was one of the group's deadliest attacks in Niger. Chad's a leading member of a multinational force battling Boko Haram, and Niger says that the wait for reinforcements isn't an easy one.
Everyone is saying that the Chadians have arrived, that there are 2,000 troops, but for now they have not crossed our border. Because of this, we've had to move our forces from other operations, special forces, which were in the north. They are now in Bosso, because we need special forces in Bosso. Some of them arrived just this morning.
Faced with a worsening monetary crisis, Zimbabwe is going for a quick fix. They're planning on printing new notes to ease reliance on US currency. These will be in circulation in August, but many have misgivings about the plan.
Since 2009, Zimbabweans have used the US dollar to do all their financial transactions. But in the last few months, the greenbacks have been scarce, and the queues at ATMs are getting longer and longer each day.
To actually get the money you want, it will take you ages because they are limiting the amount to $200.
We've got obligations. For instance, I've got a contract to supply soybeans at a company. But when I went into the bank asking for 5,000, I could not get it.
To help the market survive, government has announced it will produce small denomination bond notes from $2 to $20. The new currency to be introduced cannot be used outside Zimbabwe. The news created a sense of panic among the locals. Zimbabweans fear that the worsening liquidity crisis might lead to hyperinflation, reminding them of the 2008 crisis when the central bank printed trillion-dollar banknotes.
We hope and certainly hope that the Reserve Bank governor is definitely going to stick to the promise that he is not going to run the printing machine beyond the $200 million facility.
The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe had to borrow $200 million from the African Development Bank to guarantee the bond notes. This crisis is not only due to Zimbabwe's commercial deficit, but also to the illegal evasion of foreign currency.
Our borders are now porous. People are taking US dollars from market and hold it. Whenever we put new money in the market, we don't see it coming back. This is why I keep on importing money.
As the biggest trade partner of Zimbabwe, China has been called on for help. If Beijing pays Zimbabwe's debt, the Chinese yuan may soon replace the US dollar.
Now, ballet is taking off in leaps and bounds in Lagos. Despite cultural preconceptions, students at the Society of Performing Arts have increasingly been jumping at the chance to learn the Western dance form. It's the welcome result of a gamble taken by the school's founder. Have a look.
Plie and stretch. Welcome to the Society of Performing Arts, a renowned dance school in Lagos, created by Lebanese-Nigerian dancer Sarah Boulos. She says hundreds of students have flocked here to learn ballet over the last 12 years, despite many at first thinking the style was too Western.
We saw it a lot on TV and we looked at it like something that probably could not be taught to us because we thought it was like a white man dance or probably something it's their culture and all that, because we have our culture and our own kind of dance style. But when I came to Spain and I actually had to learn ballet, it actually taught me that it's not just about culture, because dance is a language and ballet is one of those dance languages that when you speak out, people hear it, and when you learn something like ballet, it helps your body.
Ballet was a risky choice in Nigeria, and Sarah hasn't had an easy ride. Finding funding to open the school was one of the first hurdles, but today her work is an important part of Lagos's cultural scene.
We have a very well-received audience when it comes to dance, and even when it comes to music with dance. So we're very excited about that. Nigerian community is very open-minded because they're starting to love that Span is part of Lagos. Span is part of Nigeria.
The appeal of ballet hasn't stopped at the bar. Many dancers say their training has made them more creative, and that classical dance moves have started sneaking into their hip-hop choreographies.
That's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again. Take care.